If you're enjoying this story, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next in this tale of family betrayal and survival. The rain pelted against the church windows as Scott Newman stared at the mahogany casket adorned with white lilies. His sister's casket, Chelsea, his twin, his other half, gone at 33. The priest's words faded into white noise as Scott's mind replayed their last conversation. Chelsea's excited voice describing the yacht trip their parents had organized to celebrate her inheriting James's fortune. "It'll be good for us all to reconnect," she had said. "Mum and Dad have been so attentive since James passed." Scott had declined the invitation, citing work obligations at the factory. In reality, he couldn't stomach watching his parents fawn over Chelsea now that she was worth $30 million. Their sudden interest after years of minimal contact with both twins felt transparent, calculated. The Detroit auto factory had been Scott's life for 11 years. His calloused hands and perpetual exhaustion were testaments to a life vastly different from Chelsea's. But despite their divergent paths, him in blue-collar America, her married to a successful doctor in Massachusetts, their bond had remained unbreakable. Until now. Earth to Scott. A hand on his shoulder jolted him back to the present. His mother, Patricia Newman, stood beside him, her black designer dress immaculate, her makeup perfectly applied, despite the tears that occasionally slid down her cheek. "The service is ending," she whispered. "We need to greet the guests." Scott nodded mechanically, watching his father Richard shake hands with the attendees, most of whom were James's colleagues and Chelsea's Cape Cod friends. People Scott had never met, his sister's life, packaged neatly into a 2-hour memorial service. "Such a tragedy," his father announced to a small group. "The yacht accident. Completely unexpected. The Coast Guard said the storm came out of nowhere." Scott noticed something in his father's voice, a slight tremor that didn't match his composed exterior. Richard Newman, former investment banker turned early retiree, had always been calculating, measured. Today was no different, except for that almost imperceptible quaver. As the mourners dispersed, Scott found himself alone in a corner of the reception hall, nursing a glass of whiskey. His phone vibrated in his pocket, probably another condolence message from the guys at the factory. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Unknown number, a text message that made his blood freeze. "I'm alive. Don't trust our parents. Don't react. Delete this message. I'll contact you again." Scott's hand trembled as he read the words repeatedly. His eyes darted up, scanning the room. His parents were engaged in conversation with James's former hospital administrator, their faces solemn yet composed. The phone felt hot in his palm as Scott's mind raced. Was this a cruel joke? Someone's idea of a sick prank? But who would do that? The message had the directness Chelsea always employed, no excess words, straight to the point. He deleted the message, slipped the phone back in his pocket, and made his way to the restroom. Once inside, he splashed cold water on his face, staring at his reflection. The same green eyes as Chelsea's stared back at him. Twin features they had shared since birth, now marked by confusion and the first spark of hope. If Chelsea was alive, where was she? And why would she claim their parents couldn't be trusted? Scott maintained his composure throughout the remainder of the reception, watching his parents with newfound suspicion. They had always been distant, more interested in social climbing than raising children. When Chelsea married James, a brilliant neurosurgeon from an established Boston family, they had suddenly shown interest in her life. Scott, the factory worker, remained peripheral to their aspirations. "We're heading back to the hotel," his father announced after the last guest departed. "Join us for breakfast tomorrow before your flight back to Detroit?" "Sure," Scott replied, forcing a neutral tone. 8 o'clock? Perfect. His mother kissed his cheek, her perfume overwhelming. "Get some rest, dear. It's been a difficult day for all of us." Scott watched them leave, noting how his father's hand rested on his mother's lower back, guiding, controlling. a familiar gesture that now seemed sinister in the context of the mysterious text. Back in his hotel room, Scott paced restlessly. If this wasn't a cruel joke, if Chelsea truly was alive, what did it mean? The Coast Guard had reported finding debris from the yacht. There had been a death certificate, a closed casket because the body was too damaged by the accident. His phone vibrated again at 11:42 p.m. Another unknown number. "Scott, it's me. This is a burner phone. I need you to trust me. The accident wasn't an accident. Meet me tomorrow at 6 a.m., the fishing dock in Provincetown. Come alone. Don't tell anyone." Scott's heart raced. This message contained details only Chelsea would know. They had visited that particular dock on his last trip to Cape Cod, watching the sunrise together while discussing their childhood. He typed back, "How do I know it's really you?" The response came quickly. "You have a scar on your left ankle from when we were 7 and you stepped on a rusty nail in Grandma's barn. You never told Mom and Dad because you were afraid they'd sell the farm sooner." Scott sat heavily on the bed. No one else knew that story. It had to be Chelsea. Sleep evaded him that night as theories whirled through his mind. By 5 a.m., he was driving a rental car toward Provincetown, the earliest hints of dawn breaking over the Atlantic. The fishing dock was deserted, save for a few boats gently rocking in the harbor, and one solitary figure sitting at the end, face obscured by a hooded sweatshirt. Scott approached cautiously, his footsteps echoing on the wooden planks. The figure turned, and the hood fell back. Chelsea, thinner, paler, with a healing cut across her forehead, but undeniably his twin sister. "Chelsea," he whispered, rushing forward. She embraced him tightly, her body trembling. "I didn't know who else to trust," she said, her voice breaking. "They tried to kill me, Scott. Our parents tried to kill me." Scott pulled back, studying her face. "What happened? Everyone thinks you're dead." Chelsea glanced around, nervously. "Let's walk. I can't stay in one place too long." As they strolled along the deserted beach, Chelsea explained. The yacht trip had been planned meticulously by their parents, who had cancelled at the last minute claiming food poisoning. Chelsea had gone alone, as the captain was familiar with the vessel. "But someone had tampered with the boat," she said, her voice hardening. "The radio was disabled, the emergency equipment removed. When the storm hit, there was nothing I could do. The yacht started taking on water." "How did you survive?" Scott asked, still struggling to process her words. "A fishing boat. The captain saw the yacht going down and managed to pull me from the water. I was unconscious, badly hurt. When I came to, something felt wrong. I asked him not to report finding me." "Why would Mom and Dad want to—" Scott couldn't finish the sentence. Chelsea's eyes darkened. "The insurance policy. They took out a $10 million policy on me 3 months ago, combined with my inheritance from James. They stood to gain $40 million from my death." Scott felt physically ill. "How did you find out about the policy?" "James taught me to be careful with finances. I have monitoring on all accounts and legal documents in my name. I received an alert about the policy, but thought it was just them being protective." She laughed bitterly. "I was wrong." Back in his hotel room, Scott helped Chelsea settle on the bed. She winced as she sat, revealing bandages around her ribs. "The fisherman who saved me, Eamon, he has a cousin who's a doctor. They've been helping me recover without official records. I've been staying in Eamon's cabin on the outskirts of Provincetown." Scott paced the room. "We need to go to the police." Chelsea shook her head. "With what evidence? It would be my word against theirs. They've already reported me dead, collected my body supposedly. The yacht accident looks like a tragedy, not attempted murder." "Then what's your plan?" Chelsea's green eyes, mirrors of his own, hardened with determination. "We need proof. I know they hired someone to sabotage the yacht. Eamon saw another boat near mine just before the storm hit. Someone was on board my yacht and left quickly." Scott ran his hands through his hair. "So we need to find this saboteur?" "Yes, and I think I know who it might be. Dad's former maintenance man from their Cape house, Martin Reeves. He was fired last year after Mom claimed he stole jewelry, but I always suspected there was more to that story. He knows boats, and he would have a grudge. Scott checked his watch. I'm supposed to meet Mom and Dad for breakfast in an hour. Go, Chelsea said. Act normal. I'll stay here. But first, she pulled out a small device from her pocket. Take this. It's a recording device. James gave it to me for dictating patient notes. Keep it on you. The breakfast with his parents felt surreal. Scott studied their faces as they discussed funeral arrangements and Chelsea's estate. Such a shame about the yacht, his father said, stirring his coffee. I told Chelsea that model had stability issues, but she loved it so much. Scott noted the lie. Chelsea had never owned a yacht before. James had purchased it shortly before his death, and Chelsea had rarely mentioned it. What happens to Chelsea's inheritance now? Scott asked, forcing a casual tone. His mother dabbed her lips with a napkin. Well, dear, since she had no children and James's family signed away rights to his assets in their prenuptial agreement, it would normally go to her next of kin. Us, his father clarified unnecessarily. But there's the matter of probate court. These things take time. I see, Scott said, feeling the weight of the recording device in his jacket pocket. And was Chelsea insured? A flicker of something, tension perhaps, crossed between his parents. As a matter of fact, yes, his father replied smoothly. We maintained a policy on both of you children since you were young. Just increased the coverage as you grew older. Standard practice. The lie flowed so easily that Scott almost doubted Chelsea's story. Almost. After breakfast, Scott drove to the address Chelsea had given him for Martin Reeves. The small apartment was in a rundown complex on the outskirts of town. Scott knocked, preparing his cover story about being an insurance investigator. The door opened to reveal a weathered man in his 60s, suspicious eyes narrowing at Scott. Martin Reeves, I'm investigating the Newman yacht accident. Just routine questions. Martin's face remained impassive. I don't know anything about any accident. Funny, because Richard Newman mentioned you were familiar with the yacht's maintenance history. The lie worked. Martin's expression shifted from suspicion to anger. Richard Newman mentioned me? That bastard fired me after 15 years, claimed I stole his wife's emerald earrings. I never took nothing from them. Scott pressed his advantage. Maybe you wanted to get even. The yacht accident seems convenient. Martin's eyes darted nervously. I don't know what you're implying. I think you do. And I think Richard paid you to do something to that yacht. Scott was gambling now, hoping his instincts were right. Martin started to close the door. Get out of here before I call the cops. Scott jammed his foot in the doorway. The police would be very interested in hearing about your connection to Richard Newman and a life insurance policy worth $10 million. The color drained from Martin's face. Insurance? He never said nothing about insurance. He just said he wanted to scare her, teach her a lesson about family loyalty. Said she was getting too independent since her husband died. Scott felt sick, but kept his expression neutral. Tell me exactly what he asked you to do. He paid me $5,000 to disable the radio and puncture the emergency raft, Martin admitted, once they were inside his cluttered apartment. Said his daughter needed a scare, that she'd be fine because the Coast Guard would rescue her quickly. He mentioned nothing about wanting her dead. Scott had the recording device running in his pocket, but you must have known it was dangerous. Martin looked away. I needed the money, my wife's medical bills, but I swear I never thought she'd die. When I heard the news, his voice cracked. I've been sick about it ever since. Would you be willing to sign a statement? Tell the police what Richard asked you to do? Fear flashed across Martin's face. Richard would destroy me. He has connections. He's going to prison for attempted murder, Scott said firmly, but only if you help us. Martin's expression shifted. Us? Scott hesitated, then decided to take the risk. Chelsea survived the accident. She's in hiding because she knows her parents tried to kill her. Martin stared in disbelief, then slumped in his chair. Thank God, he whispered. I'll help you. I'll tell the truth. Back at the hotel, Scott shared the news with Chelsea. He recorded his conversation with Dad about the sabotage. Scott explained. Said Dad specifically instructed him on how to make the yacht dangerous without making it look deliberate. Chelsea nodded grimly. That's good, but we need more. The insurance policy, documentation of their financial troubles. Financial troubles? Scott asked, surprised. I've been doing some digging through James's old contacts. Apparently Dad made some bad investments last year. They're nearly bankrupt, keeping up appearances but drowning in debt. My inheritance would solve all their problems. Scott shook his head in disgust. How do we get proof of the insurance policy? Chelsea smiled for the first time since their reunion. I already have it. Before I died, I had my lawyer send me copies of all financial documents with my name on them. The policy is clear, taken out 3 months ago, with Mom and Dad as sole beneficiaries. We still need to be careful, Scott warned. If they realize you're alive or that I know something, we could both be in danger. Chelsea's expression hardened. There's something else you should know. After James died, I changed my will. If anything happened to me, everything goes to you, not them. They don't know that. Scott stared at his sister. Why would you do that? Because I trust you, she said simply. You're the only family who ever truly cared about me, not what I could provide. James knew that too. The realization of how much Chelsea had valued their relationship brought tears to Scott's eyes. While he had been working double shifts at the factory, feeling disconnected from his sister's wealthy life, she had been ensuring he would be taken care of. We need to move quickly, Chelsea said. The insurance company will process the claim soon. Once they have that money, they might disappear. Scott nodded. I have an idea. I'll tell them I need to extend my stay to help with Chelsea's estate. That will give us time to gather everything and take it to the authorities. Be careful, Chelsea warned. They're desperate and dangerous. They've already tried to kill once. The next morning, Scott met his parents for coffee before their scheduled flight back to Florida, where they had relocated after retirement. I've been thinking, he began, noting how his mother's attention sharpened at his serious tone. There's so much to handle with Chelsea's estate, her house, belongings, legal matters. I'd like to stay a few extra days to help sort things out. His parents exchanged a look that Scott now recognized as calculation. That's very thoughtful, son, his father said, but unnecessary. The lawyers will handle everything. I insist, Scott replied firmly. Chelsea would want me to be involved. After a moment, his mother nodded. Of course, dear. Take all the time you need. We trust your judgment completely. The words, so caring on the surface, so hollow underneath, made Scott's stomach turn. He wondered how he had never seen through them before. Over the next 2 days, Scott and Chelsea built their case. Martin Reeves provided a sworn statement detailing Richard Newman's instructions for sabotaging the yacht. Chelsea's lawyer confirmed the existence of the recently changed will and provided documentation of the insurance policy. Scott discovered financial records showing his parents' mounting debt, giving them clear motive. They decided to approach Detective Sarah Castillo, an investigator known for her integrity and thoroughness. Meeting in a secure location arranged by Chelsea's lawyer, they presented their evidence. Detective Castillo listened intently, her expression growing more serious as the full picture emerged. This is compelling, she acknowledged, reviewing the documents. But for a case this sensitive, we need to be absolutely certain. Mrs. Newman, please call me Chelsea, she interjected. Chelsea, your apparent death has already been reported. There's a death certificate on file. We need to move carefully to avoid tipping off your parents while we build an airtight case. What do you suggest? Scott asked. We'll need to record further conversations with your parents, Castillo explained. Get them to implicate themselves more directly. And we'll need to formally establish that Chelsea is in fact alive. The plan they devised was risky but necessary. Scott would return to his parents' hotel before their rescheduled departure and confront them with partial information, enough to make them nervous, but not enough to reveal that Chelsea was alive. That evening, Scott entered his parents' hotel suite with the recording device active in his pocket. Scott, his mother exclaimed, We were just packing. Is everything all right? Not really, he replied, maintaining a calm facade despite his racing heart. I've been going through Chelsea's papers and found something interesting. An insurance policy worth $10 million used taken out just 3 months ago. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. His father set down his drink slowly. Yes, we mentioned that. Standard practice for the children. Except you never had a policy on me, Scott countered. I checked. And the timing is interesting. Right after Chelsea inherited James's fortune. His mother laughed nervously. Darling, you're under stress. Grief can make people suspicious of innocent things. Is it innocent that you cancelled your trip at the last minute? That the yacht's safety equipment was tampered with? That you stood to gain $40 million from Chelsea's death? His father's face hardened. Be very careful with what you're implying, son. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. And I'm wondering if I should take these facts to the police. The threat hung in the air. Scott watched his parents exchange glances. The same silent communication they had perfected over decades of marriage, now taking on a sinister quality. You're upset, and understandably so, his father said finally, but throwing around accusations won't bring Chelsea back. Think about what you're doing to this family. Family? Scott laughed bitterly. Is that what you call it? You barely acknowledged my existence for years. You only started paying attention to Chelsea after James died and left her his money. His mother approached, reaching for his arm. Scott, please, we've all suffered a terrible loss. Don't make it worse with these delusions. Scott stepped back from her touch. The Coast Guard report mentioned the radio was disabled and the emergency equipment was missing. Convenient, isn't it? Accidents happen on the water, his father said tersely. Chelsea wasn't experienced with boats. But Martin Reeves is, Scott replied, watching his father's face pale. He knows exactly how to make an accident look natural. His father recovered quickly. I don't know what you think you know, but you're making dangerous accusations without proof. We're your parents, Scott. We loved Chelsea. You loved what she was worth to you, Scott replied, turning to leave. I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. As he reached the door, his father called out, What will that accomplish? She's gone, Scott. Nothing will bring her back. Scott paused, the recording device capturing every word. Maybe not, but justice might help me sleep at night. The next morning unfolded, according to Detective Castillo's plan. The police arrived at Richard and Patricia Newman's hotel as they were checking out. Martin Reeves's testimony and the recorded conversations providing sufficient grounds for their arrest. Scott watched from across the lobby as his parents were escorted out. His father's face a mask of controlled anger, his mother crying dramatically for the benefit of onlookers. They didn't see him, just as they had rarely truly seen him throughout his life. The case against Richard and Patricia Newman was built meticulously over the following weeks. Chelsea was officially declared alive, her reappearance sending shockwaves through the community. The media descended on the story. Wealthy parents attempting to murder their daughter for inheritance money, the surviving twin who uncovered the plot, the fisherman who saved Chelsea's life. Scott took a leave of absence from the factory to support his sister through the legal proceedings. They spent evenings on the deck of Chelsea's Cape Cod mansion, watching the same ocean that had nearly claimed her life. What will you do now? Scott asked one evening as they shared a bottle of wine. After the trial, Chelsea gazed out at the horizon. I'm selling this place. Too many memories. James loved it, but I need a fresh start. She turned to him. What about you? Will you go back to Detroit? Scott considered the question. The factory had been his life for so long, a place where he could disappear into honest work while avoiding the painful reminder that his family had never valued him. But now, everything had changed. I'm not sure, he admitted. For the first time, I feel like I have options. Chelsea smiled, reaching for his hand. James always said you had untapped potential. He wanted to offer you a position managing the foundation he was planning before he got sick. I'd like to honor that wish. A foundation? Scott asked, surprised. For neurological research and treatment accessibility. James believed healthcare should be available to everyone, not just those who could afford it. The irony that he married into a family like ours wasn't lost on him. She squeezed his hand. I'd like you to help me build it. The James Newman Foundation. Scott felt a weight lifting, the burden of inadequacy he had carried for years, working in a factory while his twin married into wealth and prestige. I'd be honored, he said finally. The trial of Richard and Patricia Newman became a sensation, their calculated plan exposed in painstaking detail. Chelsea testified with quiet dignity, Scott beside her for support. Their parents maintained their innocence until Martin Reeves produced the recordings of Richard's instructions for sabotaging the yacht. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts of attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy, Scott felt no joy, only relief that justice had been served and that Chelsea was safe. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Chelsea stepped forward, Scott at her side. Today isn't about vengeance, she said clearly. It's about truth and consequences. My brother and I are moving forward with plans to establish the James Newman Foundation for neurological research and healthcare accessibility. We're transforming this painful chapter into something positive. Later, as they drove away from the courthouse for the last time, Chelsea turned to Scott. I've been thinking about something. Newman isn't just their name, it's ours too. We can reclaim it, define it by our actions instead of theirs. Scott nodded, understanding her perfectly as only a twin could. A new beginning for both of us. 3 months later, the James Newman Foundation opened its doors in Boston. Chelsea served as president, with Scott as executive director. The foundation's mission, providing neurological care to underserved communities, quickly garnered support from James's former colleagues and patients. On the wall of the main entrance hung a simple plaque, founded in memory of Dr. James Newman by Chelsea and Scott Newman. Every ending is a new beginning. And as for Richard and Patricia Newman, serving consecutive sentences in separate correctional facilities, they received no visits, no letters, no acknowledgement from their children. The family ties, stretched thin for decades, had finally broken completely, replaced by the stronger bond between twins who had discovered that true family is defined by love and loyalty, not blood alone. If you enjoyed this story about betrayal, resilience, and justice, please hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life.